we had the inflation figures, as we've been just mentioning, and they were actually below the target that he set at the beginning of this year. You remember he had those 5 pledges. One of them was to halve inflation in the course of the year, and that meant that inflation, were he to hit that target, would have to be 5.3% or less in the final 3 months of this year. And we've just had the CPI inflation number for October, and it is 4.6%. So comfortably below where he wanted it to be. Obviously, this begs all sorts of questions. Why has it fallen sharply? It's fallen from 6.7% to 4.6%. And the big driver of that is that energy prices are down. Energy prices are down very significantly compared to this time last year. And I had a quick look at what's been happening to energy prices, and gas prices are 31% below, or they are 31% below where they were a year ago, and electricity prices or costs are 15.6% below where they were last year. So that's the main driver. That's why inflation is so much lower than it was. But there's quite a lot of other stuff going on as well, isn't there, Steph?
Yeah, there is. And do you know, it's really interesting, isn't it? This whole rhetoric around him meeting his target, because he certainly, when inflation was over 10%, wasn't saying that the government were part of causing that, were they? It's this whole idea that, it's correlation rather than causation here, isn't it?
Well, and that's right, and that's completely right, because apart from anything else, he can't control electricity and gas prices at all. I mean, possibly on the margin, if he were to sort of massively accelerate the building of wind farms, he might in a year or two have an impact on the price of electricity. But no, this is a world price. And so he has no control over any of that, as you say. So the element of the fall of inflation that is down to energy prices, it has nothing to do with him. I mean, we should point out, of course, that last year there was a massive subsidy for energy prices, and that's not there anymore.
No, this was the energy bill support scheme, wasn't it, where every household got 400 quid discount on their energy bills for the winter of 2022 and 2023. It was £600 in Northern Ireland as well. But yeah, there isn't that this year.
And I think it's also just worth, before we then break down other really important elements of what's going on with inflation, because there's a ton more of stuff to talk about here. I think it is also worth pointing out that although, as I said earlier, gas costs have fallen by 31% in the year, nonetheless, the price of gas in October 2023, okay, so now, is 60% higher than it was 2 years ago in October 2021. Yeah. So gas and electricity prices, with no support from the government at the moment, are still really high for people, right? And
yes,
and lots of people are still going to struggle with their gas and electricity bills in the coming winter. It's still a huge headache for people.
And the other thing about all of this as well is, when we're talking about inflation now being 4.6%, that is still well above the 2% target for the Bank of England, and that still means prices are going up for for people, and people are really struggling at the moment. I was this week talking to various food bank and baby bank charities and kids charities, and all of them are seeing unprecedented demand, and it is from the working poor. It's people who've got jobs but literally cannot afford, their income is not covering what they need to pay in bills. And I know we had some good news this week about wages as well, in terms of how much wages are going up by, but still, for so many people, they do not feel better on any level. And this whole, great, Rishi's met his target, is just not sitting with people. It's not sitting comfortably.
I mean, certainly if you're at the bottom end of the income distribution, if you're on low pay, obviously you're still struggling. I mean, food price inflation has come down very sharply. It wasn't that long ago. It was almost 20%. It's now 10%.
But they're still going up. That's the thing. It's even if it's come down, prices are still going up.
10% food inflation is crippling, right, for many people. But we should point out, and I think it is important, that if you look at statistics that were out only yesterday, pay in the economy as a whole, including bonuses, was rising in September at 7.9% a year. Okay, that compared to inflation, general inflation of 4.6%, that is the first time in a very long time that wages across the piece have been rising significantly faster than the cost of living. Particularly if you're on low incomes, you would say that is not fast enough. And I think, there will be many on low incomes for whom energy prices and food prices are so important that, then, as you say, they're not going to be feeling better off. But across the economy, and certainly for those on middling and upper incomes, people are now a bit better off. And I mean, obviously, politically, that is significant. It's also, it's also political, but it's also if you happen to be lucky enough to be on a higher income, you are going to be feeling a bit better. Whether or not you're going to be spending that increased money is another issue, because there are so many uncertainties in the world. And when there are uncertainties, people do, on the whole, have a propensity to save, which is one of the reasons why the economy is not growing at the moment, because people are cautious. But we should not downplay that there is a bit of better news around the place.
It doesn't feel like that on the front line. It really doesn't. I know these statistics are important, but it doesn't feel like it's many people's reality. And I know it's an average, so therefore, there's going to be people better off and worse off than that. But if you look at how much private rents are going up by, that's nearly 6%. If you look at mortgages and how much, the number of people who are about to come off fixed mortgages onto, standard variable or having to refix at an incredibly higher rate. I was talking to one of my colleagues who's going from a £800 mortgage a month to a £1,800 mortgage a month, and she's literally in tears about this. Similarly, I was talking this week to someone who works with trying to crack down on loan sharks, and there's something like over 1 million people in England who are currently in debt to a loan shark. This is some research from the Centre for Social Justice, and over half of them are using this type of debt on everyday essentials. And the loan sharks are so different now as well in terms of who these people are. It's not like some burly bloke rocking up and threatening you. It's this lady was telling me, she's called Kath Wallace, who works in the illegal money lending team. She was saying there's such a broad spectrum now. So it's people at the school gates, it's colleagues, it's neighbours, it's friends in the pub. And the one anecdote she told me is of someone who borrowed £500. I think it was something like their washing machine had broken down, and they ended up paying back thousands because they were trapped in this cycle of debt. And this couple finally managed to pay off the loan shark, but then the loan shark went and they paid back thousands more than that £500. The loan shark then turned up at this man's work and spread loads of rumours about the man, and he ended up being sacked from his job and borrowing again from this loan shark because he had no money. And similarly, she was telling me about this lady who'd borrowed £50 off her sister's friend. That then spiralled out of control, and they worked out in total she'd borrowed £3,000 from the loan shark and ended up paying back £26,000 over several years. And the loan shark's still saying she owns another £16,000. And I know they're extreme stories, but I guess my point is there are still so many people who life is not better for them.
No. I mean, the inequality in this country is, one of the great scourges. And many would say, we've ignored it far too long. You talk about interest rates, and obviously, if you're going to a loan shark, they just, they charge penal rates, whatever's happening to interest rates in the economy as a whole. But we should also talk a little bit about the outlook for interest rates, particularly since, as you pointed out, there are still hundreds of thousands of people coming off low-priced fixed-rate mortgages, having to reset interest rates, mortgage rates that are 2, 3, 4 times what they've been paying, and that is taking an enormous amount of money out of people's pockets. So obviously one of the big things on everybody's mind is, what will the Bank of England do on interest rates? I mean, my view would be, looking at these figures, my view would be, it's possible. So I was originally assuming there's no chance of the bank rate, this is the lending rate set, the interest rate set by the Bank of England. I thought there was no chance of that coming down at all till the end of next year. I think it is possible now, looking at these figures, that maybe the Bank of England will start to ease interest rates a little bit by the middle of next year. But it is worth, though, drilling down a bit further into the figures today, because in the largest part of the economy, which is the service sector, it's sort of, depending on how you measure it, something between 80 and 90% of the economy, inflation is running at 6.6%, right? That is 3 times the target for the whole economy of 2%. So that is still significant inflation in the service economy. And that is a number the Bank of England takes very seriously. Secondly, core inflation, when you strip out the energy prices we've been talking about, food prices, alcohol and tobacco, these are all prices that policy, Bank of England interest rates can't control, right? If you strip all of those out, inflation is 5.7%. So again, well above target. So the point I'm making is that the Bank of England is going to look at these figures and say, well, it's great that the world price of energy has come down and that therefore the headline rate has come down, but there are factors, there are pressures in the economy now, homegrown pressures, underlying pressures that they are going to be concerned about. Talked earlier about the good news about wages and incomes and salaries going up at anything between 7 and 8%, depending on which part of the economy you're in. Actually, if you happen to be in the city, it's 9%. Of
course it is.
Which goes back to your point about the unfairness, the inequalities. But that is good news if you happen to be getting a good pay rise. But it is bad news because the Bank of England sees that as inflationary, and it's another reason for the Bank of England not to cut interest rates anytime soon.
And it only takes one global thing to happen, and that will just, knock us off the rails again, won't it? It only takes some big supplier of gas or oil to get into trouble or, end up in a war, and that can completely derail everything, can't it?
No government can control, by definition, what are called exogenous shocks. So events across the other side of the world which lead to, big pressures on prices. So you're absolutely right about that.